Welcome back. Old Mother West Wind by Thornton Burgess. Chapter 9. Peter Rabbit Plays a Joke. One morning when big, round Mr. Sun was climbing up in the sky and Old Mother West Wind had sent all her merry little breezes to play in the Green Meadows, Johnny Chuck started out for a walk. First, he sat up very straight and looked all around to see if Reddy Fox was anywhere about. For you know, Reddy Fox liked to tease Johnny Chuck. But Reddy Fox was nowhere to be seen, so Johnny Chuck trotted down the Lone Little Path to the wood. Mr. Sun was shining as brightly as ever he could, and Johnny Chuck, who was very, very fat, grew very, very warm. By and by he sat down on the end of a log under a big tree to rest. Thump! Something hit Johnny Chuck right on the top of his round little head. It made Johnny Chuck jump. "Hello, Johnny Chuck," said a voice that seemed to come right out of the sky. Johnny Chuck tipped his head way back and looked up. He was just in time to see Happy Jack Squirrel drop a nut. Down it came and hit Johnny Chuck right on the tip of his funny black little nose. "Oh!" said Johnny Chuck and tumbled right over back off the log. But Johnny Chuck was so round and so fat and so roly-poly that it didn't hurt him a bit. "Ha, ha, ha!" laughed Happy Jack up in the tree. "Ha, ha, ha!" laughed Johnny Chuck, picking himself up. Then they both laughed together. It was such a good joke. "What are you laughing at?" asked a voice so close to Johnny Chuck that he rolled over 3 times. He was so surprised. It was Peter Rabbit. "What are you doing in my wood?" asked Peter Rabbit. "I'm taking a walk," said Johnny Chuck. "Good," said Peter Rabbit. "I'll come along too." So Johnny Chuck and Peter Rabbit set out along the Lone Little Path through the wood. Peter Rabbit hopped along with great big jumps, for Peter's legs are long and meant for jumping. But Johnny Chuck couldn't keep up, though he tried very hard, for Johnny's legs are short. Pretty soon Peter Rabbit came back, walking very softly. He whispered in Johnny Chuck's ear. "I found something," said Peter Rabbit. "What is it?" asked Johnny Chuck. "I'll show you," said Peter Rabbit, "but you must be very, very still and not make the least little bit of noise." Johnny Chuck promised to be very, very still, for he wanted very much to see what Peter Rabbit had found. Peter Rabbit tiptoed down the Lone Little Path through the wood, his funny long ears pointing right up to the sky. And behind him tiptoed Johnny Chuck, wondering and wondering what it could be that Peter Rabbit had found. Pretty soon they came to a nice mossy green log right across the Lone Little Path. Peter Rabbit stopped and sat up very straight. He looked this way and that way. Johnny Chuck stopped too, and he sat up very straight and looked this way and looked that way. But all he could see was the mossy green log across the Lone Little Path. "What is it, Peter Rabbit?" whispered Johnny Chuck. "You can't see it yet," whispered Peter Rabbit, "for first we have to jump over that mossy green log. Now, I'll jump first, and then you jump just the way I do, and then you'll see what it is I found," said Peter Rabbit. So Peter Rabbit jumped first, and because his legs are long and meant for jumping, he jumped way, way over the mossy green log. Then he turned around and sat up to see Johnny Chuck jump over the mossy green log too. Johnny Chuck tried to jump very high and very far, just as he had seen Peter Rabbit jump, but Johnny Chuck's legs are very short and not meant for jumping. Besides, Johnny Chuck was very, very fat. So, though he tried very hard indeed to jump just like Peter Rabbit, he stubbed his toes on the top of the mossy green log, and over he tumbled, head first, and landed with a great big thump right on Reddy Fox, who was lying fast asleep on the other side of the mossy green log. Peter Rabbit laughed and laughed until he had to hold his sides. My, how frightened Johnny Chuck was when he saw what he had done. Before he could get on his feet, he had rolled over behind a little bush, and there he lay, very, very still. Reddy Fox awoke with a grunt when Johnny Chuck fell on him so hard. And the first thing he saw was Peter Rabbit laughing so that he had to hold his sides. Reddy Fox didn't stop to look around. He thought that Peter Rabbit had jumped on him. Up jumped Reddy Fox, and away ran Peter Rabbit. Away went Reddy Fox after Peter Rabbit. Peter dodged behind the trees and jumped over the bushes and ran this way and that way just as hard as ever he could, for Peter was very much afraid of Reddy Fox. And Reddy Fox followed Peter behind the trees and over the bushes this way and that way. But he couldn't catch Peter Rabbit. Pretty soon, Peter Rabbit came to the house of Jimmy Skunk. He knew that Jimmy Skunk was over in the pasture, so he popped right in, and then he was safe. For the door of Jimmy Skunk's house was too small for Reddy Fox to squeeze in. Reddy Fox sat down and waited. But Peter Rabbit didn't come out. By and by, Reddy Fox gave it up and trotted off home, where old Mother Fox was waiting for him. All this time, Johnny Chuck had sat very still, watching Reddy Fox try to catch Peter Rabbit. And when he saw Peter Rabbit pop into the house of Jimmy Skunk and Reddy Fox trot away home, Johnny Chuck stood up and brushed his little coat very clean. Then he trotted back up the Lone Little Path, through the wood, to his own little path, through the Green Meadows, where the Merry Little Breezes were still playing, till he was safe in his own snug little home once more.